Regardless of how you feel about pop music, the Weeknd's Dawn FM is a buffet of analog, digital, VST, hardware, vintage and new synths and drum machines, and a lot of fun to listen to. Let's talk about the sounds of Dawn FM. Hi, I'm Zach Marr from Alamo Music here in San Antonio, Texas. You can find us online at alamomusic.com. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, turn on your notifications. This is our Alamo Sound Lab channel where we talk about all things music tech related. And today we're trying something a little different. The first, I think, of a series that we'll be doing on albums and the instruments featured in these albums. Because if you're like the average listener or player, it's oftentimes you hear an album or you hear a song and you're inspired by the sounds of that song and you want to figure out how they got that sound. And so we're going to take different albums and different songs and try and analyze, use the information that's out there, and in this case, give our kind of opinion about what's going on in an album. There's not a lot of information on Dawn FM yet, and this may be a mistake for us to make this video, but I'm going to use an educated guest to say what I think is on there and then also offer some kind of background information about what might be on there. And I want to thank Jack Zimmerman with Vintage Synthesizer Solutions. We've been chatting a little bit about this the last week, but both of us have really enjoyed the album. And what's really cool is there's two things about it that I like. One, it's definitely nostalgic for me because it feels like a 90s concept album. And I think that if you look at one of the executive producers on the album, Max Martin, he was responsible for Britney Spears, NSYNC, some of their top songs in the late 90s. And you can definitely feel this 90s nostalgic vibe. But what's also interesting is it's not really 90s style music. It's more 80s. And it's not 80s Michael Jackson Weeknd. This is 80s Depeche Mode and Human League. So different 80s and a lot of fun. So interesting kind of just album. I'm really enjoyed listening to it, and it really is got a great sound palette at play. And I think that's partially attributable to the work with one of the other executive producers, and I'm going to probably butcher the name because I've never said it out loud before. I've listened to the guy's music for a while, but Oneotrix, Point Never, I'm just going to refer to it as OPN. But Daniel Lopatin, again, I'm not sure if I'm saying his name right, but OPN is a electronic music producer, and he has a lot of great electronic music, and there's truly a love of gear, and you can hear it in his music. And he doesn't seem loyal to, vintage hardware or modern hardware or software versus hardware. He's used a variety of things. If you read interviews with him, he's used a variety of instruments in his works, and you can definitely hear that in Dawn FM, where he is listed as a co-writer and a producer on many of the tracks. So here's what I know so far in terms of instrumentation. I'm positive there is a lot of Juno 60 and our Juno 6 on this album. OPN is very fond of using Juno 60s in his music. I think the one he has, if you've read interviews, is one that his dad, it's from his dad's collection. And it's featured heavily in a lot of his music. So I'm pretty positive there's Juno 60 on a number of these tracks. Another one that I'm pretty positive about is the TR-707. I think there's even a Weeknd song with a TR-707 referenced in a previous album, so I know there's a love for the TR-707, but that is evidently on a number of the tracks. Another interesting one that I'm not 100% on, and this is Jack Zimmerman's suggestion, and I think he's right. He thinks there's a lot of System 8 on there, and I have to agree with them. There's a number of songs where you can hear in the analog, when the analog instruments, you can hear if it's recorded well. You can often hear they sound a certain way. They break up in a certain way. They have this texture and this richness that, if it's captured properly, really is an interesting palette to use in production. System 8 also has characteristics. It does a great job of modeling using ACB technology, classics like the Jupiter 8, but it has its own character, and I think it's good, and it's got more of a sheen, it's a little cleaner. I think it fits in the mix differently. The analog tends to be a little more in your face sounding, if that makes any sense. I think when I'm listening to recordings, it tends to sound a little bit more, take a more foregrounded, but at the same time not overwhelming sound. The System 8 tends to be a little bit more in the background, I feel, when I'm listening to these tracks. But I definitely hear System 8 in the tracks as well. So it's very Roland heavy album. It's got a lot of Roland-y sounds when you listen to it. So those are the three that I'm pretty certain about. There's also some great electric piano sounds, but they don't sound like actual recordings of Fender Rhodes or Wurlitzers. I think if I had to guess, I'm betting it's Spectrasonic software, because I've read in other articles that Oneotrix or OPN has used like Spectrasonic software, and it's kind of industry standard for high-end kind of emulations of those type of sounds. And that is from Eric Persing's Spectrasonics, which fits into the whole history of the Roland line with a lot of digital technology that they invented in the late 80s through the 90s. He was instrumental in that. And Spectrasonics is his kind of company, and there's Omnisphere and a number of other softwares that are very high quality samples and emulations of kind of vintage sounds. So I think there's a lot of electric piano sounds, but I think it's very high quality, either samples or emulations, and not actually the real thing. But it works amazingly. It sounds fantastic. So other things that could be going on, and I don't know, and I'm just going to list these because there's Equip Board's a fun site to look at, but I know that Oneotrix Point Never has listed in the past that he has a JX3, AX60, Akai, Kawai SX240. He has a Rhodes, it's a Mini Moog, Voyager, Polyvox. Actually, not Polyvox. That's one that's appeared in photos with the Weeknd in the studio. So all of those are potentially could be on there. The D50, Moog One, Waldorf XT. So there's a lot of synths that Oneotrix Point Never has used before. And then there's this photo. If you go on Reddit, there's already a forum started talking about this album, what are the synths on it. And on that, you can see a JDXA from Roland. You can see a System 8. You can see a Juno 6, I think, and then a Moog Prodigy. So those are all candidates, I think, for other sounds on the album. There's some times where it sounds almost Prophet-y or Moogy, but I couldn't tell what the instrument was. I can't say it definitively. But I wanted to just kind of throw this out there, start this conversation. I know it's always a point of interest when I find an album that I like or production that I like. I love to talk about it with others and try and triangulate to get to what is actually going on in the album. So I thought I'd start this conversation. Again, I could be wildly off. I'm just putting myself out there. Please leave comments below if you know what's going on in the album. Please leave a comment below, but let's solve this. I think it'd be very useful for a lot of people to know what kind of production, what kind of instruments are going on. And again, I just think this album is great because it shows with how broad a palette you have today, how many different options from software to hardware, vintage to new, that you can really create a masterpiece of synth and drum machine kind of mania, which I think this album really has a ton of good things going on, and it's a lot of fun. Regardless of how you feel about pop music, I think it's well produced and a lot of fun to listen to. Plus, it has Jim Carrey doing a lot of the voice work. Very concept album and weird. Also fitting for the times. It's a little morbid, but hey, it's the COVID era. So hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a comment below, continue the conversation. Would love to hear from you. If you didn't already, hit subscribe. And if there's another album you'd like us to do, please let us know. We'll be happy to go through it. Thanks for watching.